telephone for granted. But for one person in Washington, D.C., it has become a frightful source of terror. Imagine receiving 15 or 20 threatening phone calls every day for 9 years. Phone calls from unseen terrorists who conceal their identities by calling from payphones. That's what's happening even now for an American citizen, his friends, and their families. What makes this horror that much more disturbing is that no one knows why he has been targeted or who is responsible. Our story begins almost 20 years ago in Beirut, Lebanon. Beirut has long been a hotbed of social unrest and violence. It is indelibly etched in our memories from the tragic events in 1983 when an Arab terrorist drove a truck loaded with explosives into Marine headquarters, killing 241 people. 9 years earlier, Bashir Khoushakji and his wife Gail, both American citizens, had moved to Beirut. Gail was a professional singer who entertained at the Phoenicia Hotel, a well-known gathering place for Middle East diplomats and arms dealers. Shortly after midnight on July 1st, 1974, Bashir was on his way to pick up his wife at a party hosted by a Saudi princess. Suddenly, he was stopped by a group of unknown assailants.
Come with us, sir. Get in this car. Come. What do you want? You want money? I have money. We don't want your money. No, come with us. I've done nothing.
My biggest fear is that they would be robbers. And at the same time, I don't think anybody can dare to hurt me. I'm a U.S. citizen, and I'm not guilty of anything. And I'm sure as soon as we get somewhere, wherever they're taking me, I can explain myself.
Someone will be here to talk to you. Relax.
Bashir was now in the same frightful situation in which dozens of Westerners would find themselves over the years.
There was only one light bulb on the ceiling, and there was a blanket on the floor. All what I hope is that it has something to do with politics, so then I explain myself, and they will find out immediately I'm not a politician.
2 hours later, Bashir's abductors came to question him.
Please, you can help me?
What were you doing?
I was picking up my wife from work.
Citizenship.
I am a U.S. citizen.
You are CIA.
No, this is a mistake. Please,
Over the next few days, Bashir was tortured at regular 2-hour intervals.
They would never let me go to sleep.
My wife. You have my wife.
I would only know the hours just by the type of meals.
On the 5th day of his captivity, Bashir began to hallucinate, imagining that he heard the anguished screams of his family.
I hear the voice of my wife next door and the sound of my son crying. So at that time I said, I can't see this anymore. So I just want to die myself.
Bashir slit his wrist with a jagged piece of plastic. The terrorists rushed him to a hospital where doctors saved his life. Eventually, with the help of the hospital and his family, Bashir's release was negotiated. But to this day, he has never learned who took him hostage or why. 2 months later, Bashir returned to the United States. He soon divorced and started a career as a manager of an exotic North African restaurant on Hollywood's Sunset Strip. The restaurant quickly became popular with recording stars, movie stars, and celebrities. Within just a few years, Bashir and his family would operate restaurants in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. But in 1982, just as Bashir appeared to have his life in order, he began to receive the first in a series of threatening phone calls at the restaurant in Washington.
I don't know, it sounds very strange.
There would be phone calls where I would take them myself, and there would be nobody at the other line. Nobody would say anything. They would only breathe.
This is Bashir. Who's this? What?
This time, you'll be killed.
Who is this?
But little by little, it's escalated to be like more direct, mentioning names of all past friends, mentioning name of acquaintance that I haven't seen for a long time. The phone would not stop. And they would start to be like 20 times a day, 15 times a day, some of them from obscene phone calls to I want to kill you, there is a bomb, people laughing loud, or other people screaming under a shower. You would hear the scream of pain, machine gun fire.
On Friday. Marrakesh. Hello?
Curiously, many of the calls appear to have been made by a 10-year-old youngster who was dubbed l'enfant, French for the child. The calls continued, becoming more sinister, more menacing.
Marrakesh? Stop it.
It immediately triggered the kidnapping at that time. The voices of screams is the same voices that when I used to be a captive, I would hear them from other prisoners. I wasn't alone into that place. I would hear exactly the same voices.
May 1986. The harassment turned violent.
I opened the hood quickly. I got burned, but I had to cut the wires because I knew the flame was coming out of the wires. It was very close to the gas that would make the Jeep explode. When I took the car the next day to the mechanic, he said, it looks somebody has tampered with the wires here. It looks like it's really somebody wanted to hurt you.
Bashir requested that the FBI investigate the threats to his life. A tap was placed on his telephone, which recorded more than 3,000 threatening calls over an 18-month period. But there was no distinct pattern in where the calls originated. No arrests were ever made.
What the FBI told me was that they found out that the calls were coming from various payphones throughout the metropolitan area, which means that means Maryland and Virginia and Washington. And because of the way the pattern of the calls, that some calls are coming in sometimes 2 every minute, it just leads you to believe that there's more than one person involved, that either somebody's got an incredibly fast sports car that they're driving all around the area, or there's just several people involved, and that leads to some sort of conspiratorial thinking.
Finally, Bashir committed himself to the psychiatric ward of a hospital, attempting to seek therapy and isolate himself from the constant barrage of harassing phone calls.
It is lonely.
You want me to turn it off?
It's a loneliness with protection. But it's better than to be exposed to terrorism.
Unremitting chronic anxiety, I think, is the basic condition. But the fundamental fact remains that the source of this fear, the source of his depression, the source of his preoccupation as to who is doing this to him is reality-based.
While Bashir was in the hospital, this baffling mystery took a surprising twist. Raj Tooley, Bashir's replacement at the restaurant in Washington, soon discovered that he, too, was targeted for terror.
What is this? What do you want?
You.
What do you want from me?
Why do you want to kill me?
They know what you are wearing that time you are talking to them. They know your schedule. They know what time you'll be leaving. And they tell you that they know ins and outs of where you live and what you do, and they are going to get you.
3 weeks after Raj became reservation manager of the restaurant, his son Richard would also become a victim.
Hi, you're Richard, right? Get him!
2 men just jumped at him, and they beat him up very badly for no reason known to him or us until today. But they did call me to say that it was the L'Enfant party. And they told me how was it for starters.
The next day, someone painted a chilling message on the front door of the Thule residence.
What?
Look at the door!
These people are very ruthless, and I don't know what they want from us.
Who is responsible for terrorizing Bashir Khosrowshahi, his associates, and their families? Bashir believes that the answer may be found back in 1974, when he came in contact with the shadowy figures of Beirut.
My wife would invite me sometimes to go with her to parties thrown by so-called arms dealers, an important personality into the world of politics or international dealing and wheeling. And I would go there. Now, is this exposure is something that has marked me maybe? Or is this something that I should not have gone? Or did my wife have anything to do with it? I don't know.
It's possible that when he was kidnapped, that he saw some people he was not meant to see. That possibly, and this is really speculating, that possibly those people then became diplomats or became high mucky mucks in some countries' diplomatic service, that they are here in Washington, that when they found out Bashir was coming to Washington, that they didn't, and when they found out that he was going to run this Middle Eastern restaurant, which as it turns out became very successful and was a mecca for a lot of Middle Eastern people, that possibly they just didn't want him around, and that this was their way to, it's like Gaslight, the movie Gaslight. They want to drive him nuts and remove him from the scene.
Have there been any calls from me?
Bashir has been living in the psychiatric ward for 6 years.
The first 2 were from L'Enfant, but the third was from Dr. Wiley.
Fine.
The terrorists have found a way to harass him, even behind the protective walls of the hospitals. To this day, Bashir continues to receive an average of 7 calls every week from L'Enfant.